I know a lot of what your job has been over the past 5 or 6 years is working with audio volunteers and teaching them, and not only teaching them the technical stuff, but teaching them how to mix.
Yes.
What do you see? Like, what are some little nuggets of wisdom as far as learning and improving, and how do you get better? And even in your career, how have you improved what you do?
I think one of the things that for me, mixing, the key to mixing music is the music. And music has kind of been part of my life, my whole life. My mom was the organist at church, and my brother is a concert pianist and graduated with his master's in music, and I grew up with music all in my family. And, I think the key to mixing is understanding the music side of things, and what about that music that makes my heart have emotion? What about, that to me is one of the key things to understanding a portion of the mix and going, man, that really stuck out to me. And what about that? Was it the low end that stuck out? Was it the power in the low end? Was it, the detail in the high end? Is it just how smooth something sounds, or how aggressive something sounds, or how, all of these emotions can be drawn out from music. And I think before you even sit behind a console and think about what am I going to do with what's coming down the channel strips, is what kind of emotion does this pull out? And I think that's one of the things that I've always gone back to. And what does your ear hear? And if you can't latch on to the emotion of the music and the purpose or the heart behind the music, then it's going to be hard to just turn knobs and hope for, what's really there.
So speaking of mixing, when you have a performance coming up, whether that's a Sunday service or a special event, what do you do to get ready before the band even shows up? Anything you like to do to make sure you're ready for that?
Well, I guess in my current scenario, the cool thing is we have a really cool system where we can communicate with what songs are coming down the pipe or whatever, and what we're doing. And, a lot of times there'll be reference mixes or whatever that you can listen to, or somebody else has recorded a song, or we can say, hey, this Sunday we're going to do an acoustic Sunday. I'm not going to mic the kick drum and go for that huge rock and roll kick drum sound when it's an acoustic Sunday. I'm not going to, try to, part the hair of the audience, with the subs on a Sunday, that we're going to go a little more low key. But if there are songs that we're going to, really try to, grasp the attention of the audience and really go for it, and if that really calls for it, we'll definitely, go for. I try to. You can kind of tell what kind of Sunday it's going to be, or what kind of performance it's going to be. A lot of times we do more theatrical things, or we do a lot more musical things, and you can kind of already tell, I want to go for an aggressive sound, I want to go for a really smooth sound, I want to go for something right in the middle. If it's worship music, worship music is actually one of the toughest genres I think there is to mix, because there's a fine line between being real aggressive and really powerful and distracting. And so sometimes it's difficult to ride that fine line. You don't want people out there, plugging their ears because it's so loud, but we want them engaged. So I always try to tell my audio volunteers when they ask, is it too loud? And the purpose of whatever we're doing is we want it to be engaging. And if it's engaging, then it's loud enough. And if it's disengaging, then it's too loud. And that's a gray area sometimes for some people, especially for different generations of people. So, but I try to look at a mix before the band even gets there, and just kind of think through the night. It's not like I have this moment during the week where I sit down and go, today it's going to be one of these kind of mixes. But I do try to take things into context. Every time I sit down, I find myself in ruts sometimes where I just EQ things because I know that's the way I've always done it before. But I really try to think through, especially if it's a different night, I try to think through, now why did I really just take 250 out of the kick drum? Because I've always taken 250 out of the kick drum? Or does the mic actually sound okay? And a lot of times I tend to do things the same way all the time. But I really try to take every time I sit behind the console as a learning experience and take it as, am I making the right decision every time I turn that knob?
That's cool. So being prepared, kind of knowing what the music is, what it calls for, is a good first step. When the band gets there, what do you go through? Checking your mics. What's your norm there?
Even before the band gets there, there's a ton of preparation. And I had a guy working with me several years ago, and we were on the stage setting things up, and we were checking mics and stuff like that. And he was a young guy, and he looked at me and goes, "Man, I just want to mix." And I go, "Man, you're mixing right now." And doing sound is really, honestly, I would say way more than half is on the other side of the console, and being on stage and listening to the instrument, making sure that your mics are right, making sure that your line check is right, and doing sound is getting mic placement, choosing mics, getting all those things, making sure that those mic lines are clean, and that they're not half-legged and unbalanced, and that your DIs are padded properly or not padded properly or ground lifted, and there's a ton of detail that has to happen on stage. And before the band gets there, I'm trying to think through every scenario possible, that if I can't leave front of house, for instance, like during a Sunday morning, do I have everything at my disposal? Sometimes I put 2 mics on things to have 2 mics so I can choose one or the other, but if one goes down, you've got a backup. A lot of people are like, I don't care for a snare bottom, but you know what? If the snare top goes out, you don't want to be dependent on your overhead to get your awesome snare sound, and I'd much rather have a snare bottom than nothing. And in the same way with some of the foundational parts of your mix, having 2 mics on things or something like that is, if you've got the channels and if you've got the time, I've always told my guys, you can always mute a mic. But if you're like, man, I wish I had a 57 on that instead of this, well, and if you're at the console and the audience is there, the probability of that mic getting changed out is really slim. So, before the band gets there, I really try to set up our stage in a way that we have everything we need possible, like we can't even come back up here, because sometimes the stage is unapproachable, once the audience gets there. And, those are the things that you try to set yourself up for success once you get behind the knobs. And doing sound is a lot of being on stage, a lot of interacting with the musicians, a lot of knowing the gear up here, so that when you make decisions on the console, with the advent of digital consoles, the invent of digital consoles, and all the things that you can do at front of house, you can fix almost anything from behind the desk. But it's not always the right place to fix it. I can gate out a buzz, I can do all kinds of things, but it's so much better if you can get the mic placed right, if you can get, all the buzzes gone and all those things. And yeah, we can fix them behind the desk, but if you can fix them on the stage, you're taking your mix to a whole other level.
So you mentioned relationships with musicians. Talk to us about why that's important and how that's beneficial.
Well, there's always, relationships with musicians versus sound guys. I think sometimes musicians think sound guys are those people that tried to be musicians and didn't make it. And because of a lot of cases, that is true. And people that love music and they just flat couldn't, do what they do in music, ended up doing sound. And I hope that that's not the truth in our case, but already before you even walk in the door, a musician has had a bad experience with a sound guy. And that's just one of those things that is just, I think, will always be there. And there's that tension there already before you even walk in the door. So you're already losing the battle when you walk in, when you meet a sound guy, when you meet a musician, when a musician meets a sound guy. And I think one of the key things is when you build a relationship with them and that trust can grow. If you whatever you can do to build trust between the musician and you, the more that the musicians trust you, the whole it affects your mix tremendously. And I say that because there have been times when I've had to walk up on stage, and when I've got a keyboard player that's choosing a patch that's just not working with the other electrics or something like that, or if there's something that's not working musically. If you're just this sound guy that is just a sound Nazi, and for you to approach a musician and say, hey, what you're doing isn't working musically, is almost a slap in the face. And anytime you can approach them and there's a relationship there, and you can say, hey, I'm struggling with this out there, tell me, what you're going for, can really allow them to be not be so defensive about, their talent or skill, and really help you improve what you're trying to get out for the audience, which is a good product. And I think those are huge things. Another huge thing is educating yourself on the instruments. I think when a musician grabs a Telecaster, you should know kind of what that's going to sound like. And when he grabs a Strat, you should know what it sounds like. And when he grabs when he's running through all these kind of effect pedals or whatever, and you see that he's got certain effect pedals down there, if he's got delays or compressors or, all these, overdrive pedals or whatever, it's important that you kind of know what kind of sound you're going to get. If he's got an AC30 cabinet or an orange cabinet, understanding those kind of things can really help you make sure that what that musician has spent way too much money on and way too much time on his gear. You can talk with a musician about gear for hours and they'll love it. And especially their gear, not your gear, but their gear. And, understanding and educating yourself about what they have and why they have it. Tell me about the pickups on your bass guitar. Why do you have those? Are those active or are they passive? And when they plug in and when you hear what you hear, you're going to learn like the difference between that guy's bass and the next guy's bass, and why they chose those things. I like it because the bass player for this band, he uses it and I love that bass tone. When you go out and you listen and go, I can see how he's going for that bass tone. Understanding what the instruments are supposed to sound like before you even, edit it, if you will. Or mix it, can really help you kind of grasp what's going on. And the only way you're going to get that kind of information is interfacing with the musicians and asking them, why they chose what they chose. Even with drums and drummers, a lot of times there'll be completely different kits, and there are a trillion different kinds of drums out there. There are a trillion different kinds of cymbals and trillion different kinds of snares, and every one of them is going to be different. And that's kind of the beauty of what we do, is you'll never get a scenario that's exactly the same every time. Even if it's the same band with the same instruments, you might be in a different venue every night, and you've got a different thing, and you've got to understand what's constant and what's changing and what's different. And interfacing with the musicians is a pretty key part of understanding what you're supposed to be getting before you even mix it. And I think those are pretty key things to having a successful mix.